involuntary at the same time, because then it aborts any outside contracts you made. So that contract was kind of aborted at the same time, because you can't have slavery and free on a land that is contracted under a constitution, and then a foreigner come here and say, well, I want you to recognize me as separate on this land. Well, you can be recognized as separate, but you will still be a subject, okay? You'll be a separate subject, and that's all you will be, because the law of one made sure of that, okay? The law of one made sure. So you can separate yourself in your own mind, but God has another agenda for his namesake. And therefore, when the Dred Scott decision came in 1857, you could have been a black Moor you wanted to. If you walked down the street, they felt as though they had the right to put their hands on you, confiscate you as a slave, okay? See, and so for you to try to overlook that, and this was a legitimate Supreme Court, because it said it violated the Fifth Amendment of trying to use private property of Dred Scott for public, as public property. If you said that he could walk free and he can blend outside of being private property, it violated the Fifth Amendment, and therefore the Missouri Compromise was overturned. So it didn't matter whether you was Moor in 1857 when that decision came down. That squashed it and showed you was just a subject nevertheless, and you was going to do that time with the rest of black Americans. You didn't do a separate time then. You didn't have no separate treatment, honey. So you need to let go of this illusion of being separate and being above the holy covenant rest of the nation of God Almighty, okay? And I'm not saying Moors is insignificant. They're very significant. They're just not separate. And the true God's sovereignty is not a place or a foreign nation. It's a direct link to God by the namesake of Judah. And so if you would say it's a place, it would be Judea. That's the only place I can think, or New Jerusalem, okay? Not Mauritania. And therefore, they go and they try to use this as a separate nation, and they want to be treated like public mystery Babylon. They don't want to be harassed like normal blacks. So they ask them for jurisdiction. But they don't understand when they ask these judges for jurisdiction, they never had jurisdiction as a Moor in 1787. All they was subjects of a jurisdiction. So when when the Moors is asking the judges for jurisdiction, they resorting to what God left them, not that treaty that they think they are resorting to. God left them the right, and all black people the right in the Holy Covenant to ask jurisdiction under judges as national citizens under the Holy Covenant Constitution, not under some treaty that was treated just like a subject in 1857. It was when blacks was put in the Constitution as legal, blameless, non-consenters of God's sovereignty, is when the Moors then now can ask jurisdiction. It's based on that, not based on some treaty which treated them like a subject. And to show it's just a subject treaty, Mauritania, whatever nation they say that's from, Morocco, have received a lot of foreign aid under incorporate doctrine, which makes them nothing but consent to debt and theft and public mystery Babylon. So if they want to insist that they are one with a foreign nation that's part of the world debt and under public mystery Babylon, in abomination of desolation, done contracts just to so-called be separate from black Americans in the Holy Covenant as Judah, then they're walking foolishly in their law, or whatever law they attach to that. They're attaching that law to a treaty that made them a subject. Now see, they trying to use that subject and then trying to say, but we're constitutional. But the constitutional black Americans are not subjects. So don't try to play two hands here, because you trying to merge, just like the Mystery Babylon, you trying to mix the public up and the republic. And the black Americans are the real God's sovereign constitutional citizens, and they the first legal foreign contractors protected by God's sovereignty and constitutionality. So as much as you think you know as Moors is the less you know. See, you got to caution about being too smart, because being too smart always makes you miss the forest for the trees, okay? You know, you can go argue based on this treaty, but all you doing is arguing of being a subject, okay? See, you had to have legality in that Constitution, and that came to black people as a whole. It didn't come to outside no treaty. You want a treaty to be equal to the Constitution? None of your treaties is equal to the Constitution, because blacks, even in involuntary servitude, protected this nation from all treaties, because the Constitution had involuntary servitude, so it was like consent and non-consent in there, okay? And the non-consent had the legal jurisdiction of consent to non-consent. So it was consent, legal jurisdiction to non-consent, which means that treaty wasn't really a treaty. It was a trick to get them off the back after a Revolutionary War. They didn't want to fight again, so they signed a lot of treaties, making them think that they was cooperating with them, because they knew they would overlook slavery in the land, and the Constitution was based on the land. So, I mean, that's a brief summation of real facts, okay? That's a brief summation of real God sovereignty and real facts. Now, my opinion is, it's coming out that some people who call themselves Moors participated in the slave trade. And my opinion on that is, if they are so head on seeing themselves as separate, then that might be something to look into. Because if they insist on seeing themselves as separate now, then we can look at their mentality of thinking they was better and possibly being part of those that caused our demise among us. Now that's opinion. I would have to have more detailed and research information to say it's fact. But I'm saying, based on them and their ideal of separatism, it could be that they thought they was better than God's people and participated as God's people into assisting and enslaving, helping the enslavement of black people, because it's coming out that they participated in the slave trade. And so this is a mentality that many have, and the constitutional writers, reconstructionists under God Almighty hand knew there was some betrayal in the black man, and this is a fact. So they put the black woman as the supremacy clause, since she gives birth to him anyway. So if these so-called Moors keep talking this separatism and nonsense, she would have the power as the supremacy clause to non-consent them preemptively from trying to divide the law of God being one nation, one people under God, law and heavenly jurisdiction of Jerusalem and of God's sovereignty, who span the globe of many kingdoms, many places, because they're not only terrestrial, they're interstellar. That's why they have the God particle. That's why they're the God namesake. So I hope this has been somewhat insightful for you. Take it from there. This is Mary Omni from the House of King David. Shalom.